You're listening to the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast, where I'll be giving valuable insight and thought-provoking perspectives about the connections between our hair and how we live our daily lives. I know that many of you have heard people talking about jerry curls, pressing curls, high top fades, and sporting waves, the best products for your hair, and so much more. But what you haven't heard is how our hair can be a full reflection of what's going on in our hearts, what's going on in our minds, what's going on in our bodies, and what's going on in our souls. I'm your host, Darius Peace, and I'm excited to be your weekly guide on the journey to having better hair and a better life.
So I'm laughing at myself, Darius, because I am routinely breaking my rule of trying not to be the voice, right? My job is to spin records, as they say in Players Club. But you and I were just having such a phenomenal conversation.
So good, man. Yes.
And you know what excites me is the growth I've seen from you just from the first recording to where we are now. Less than a month, really. Yeah. I think maybe around the month mark. But here's what's important. What you and I were just talking about is we're only about 6 episodes deep into recording the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast.
My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast.
And sorry, it's Monday. My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast. Yeah. And what we were talking about is you said that the people we've given a little sneak preview have enjoyed the episodes that are heavier.
Yeah.
And what I was saying to you, and you were like, no, we need to record this.
Yeah.
And I agree, is think back to 2019, right? So 2019, that was a year that I felt like I personally continued to see what social media had always been. It was a mixture of lighthearted and fluffy, but people were not afraid to put that heaviness out there. Mm-hmm. I would see people talk about, you know, when they were going through a tough time personally, whether that was physically, mentally, emotionally. You get to 2020, and very early on in 2020, the world changed.
Yeah, it changed.
For all of us.
Yes.
Right? What I said to you that I wanted to make sure I repeated into the mic was we did not know if that was going to be our new normal.
Right.
I remember at one point in 2020 sitting there and I was like, so are we just like no more gatherings, no more being around large groups of people? Will we always have to wear a mask? What will life look like? So that led to the public shifting and wanting to share so much good. That's what we do. It never went back, at least from what I see on social media. Mm-hmm. So,
well, one of the things that happened during that shift was, I remember before the pandemic hit, we could cough and nobody would ever think much about a cough. It was just like, oh, okay, that person's coughing or that person's sneezing. But when the pandemic hit, if you coughed or if you sneezed, everybody was looking at you like, wait a minute, what the hell? Are you okay? And so it created health shaming. Like people became ashamed to cough or ashamed to sneeze, because we didn't want people to think that we had COVID-19.
Correct. I was at the bank last Tuesday or Wednesday, right? And I coughed. And I made that same statement to the bank tellers because I was the only customer in there. And they all laughed. But what was funny to me is before I made the joke, when I coughed, they all looked up and had that look, the COVID look, as I call it, on their face.
Yeah,
like why are you coughing? Because even something as simple as that has not gone away.
Oh, no. So. It's like, are you okay? But we feel so ashamed to cough and to sneeze and in some cases to breathe. It makes me think about just myself in regards to shame. I oftentimes think that I limit myself and I'm not really showcasing my best self for me and for others because of carrying shame. Like I can sometimes be ashamed of, I don't want to get on video because I'm ashamed of how I look. I'm ashamed of what my body may look like. Have I gained any weight? Does my stomach look big? I'm ashamed of what my voice may sound like, and I love hearing myself, but I'm ashamed of that sometimes. I'm ashamed of my my ability to showcase the journey. Like typically, I don't want people to see, or I have not wanted people to see me in the journey, creating anything. I want people to see me after I've learned something and become good at it, or after I've succeeded. And that to me really does hold me back in so many different ways. And so I'm saying this because I'm ready to tackle this. I know in one of the recordings that we've done here at the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast studio is focused on me wanting to float. And I was talking about how I was on a business trip. I was hired to speak at an event in Trinidad and Tobago. It was the Natural Hair and Health Expo in Trinidad and Tobago. I was very fortunate to be one of the very first keynote speakers of that event, and it was fantastic. And so the presenters of the event took me swimming, and we were swimming in the Caribbean Ocean. And so they were floating on their backs, and they were doing it so easily, so beautifully, so effortlessly. And I could not do it. And they kept saying, Darius, you need to float. You've got to let go. And I could not let go. And one of the reasons in hindsight, I can see that I wasn't able to let go was because I was ashamed of them seeing me struggle. I was ashamed of them seeing me try. I was ashamed of seeing me arrive at a place of success, because I'm so used to people seeing and experiencing my arrival at success and not the journey. And that's a lot for me to carry, and that's a lot for anybody to carry. And so I'm here to float. That was, if I didn't learn anything from that moment, it was that I am forever on the journey to float. And I'm not talking about some alluding to getting high, because it's not about getting high. And I don't want anybody to mistake it for that. I'm not talking about floating in a state of inebriation. I'm talking about conscious floating, intentional floating, intentional allowing myself the freedom to be and exist as my best self and my greatest showcase for me and for you. So, and it also makes me think about, so it all goes back to hair for me. That's the thing that my mind always goes back to, connecting the dots and the parallels between our hair and our lives and how this plays out. And when my wife and I started having kids, we were very intentional about making sure that they were only exposed to words of affirmation referencing them. So we didn't allow them to go around some of our family members. And, you know, I know people are listening to this, and if any of my family members are listening to this podcast, none of this, let me just preface this. Please don't take none of this personally. This is not about you. This is about the journey. And it's from my lens. And I can only speak on my lens and from my perspective in this regard. And so this is not a personal attack on you. This is just what has happened. So growing up, there's always been a lot of toxic behavior, intraculturally speaking, within our family and within our experience in the Black community. And this is, you know, for me and my wife, there's always something that creates comparisons for Black people regarding their hair texture. Do you have good hair? Do you have bad hair? Do you have light skin? Do you have dark skin? You know, are you fat? Are you skinny? And all of these things that will constantly insinuate that a person is not enough and create shame for not being what the status quo says is enough. And so in our efforts to make sure that our children have been protected from that, especially in their formative years, their primary years, while they were growing into an age where they could have a sense of self that was strong and they could stand up against anything that was contrary to any positive beliefs that they've been taught to have about themselves. So I think that my wife Megan and I did a really good job of that. And that's because we wanted to protect them from having the type of shame that we grew up with. by not feeling enough, especially when it came to our hair and our complexions, because those are things that plague so many people in the black community and cause so many acts and habits that are consequences of shame. And it's so interesting. Well, before I go into that, I want to talk about. I want to let everybody know that we we're going to take a break, but in the meantime, I want you to hear a word from our sponsors, and I don't want you to just listen to this word from our sponsors and just say, "Oh yeah, okay, that was cool," because they're not here just donating commercials. These sponsors are here to make sure that people are aware of their specific products or services, and that they have something that can add value to our lives in some way, shape, or form. So don't just listen to these commercials, but make sure you reach out to these businesses, reach out to these companies, and purchase their products and service. If not for you, then for somebody else. But we want to make sure that we honor our sponsors, because we can't make this production happen without the help of our sponsors. If you want to help me keep delivering great information about the parallels between our hair and our lives, then you've got to support our sponsors so that they can keep supporting us. So we'll be back.
Speakers, coaches, experts, and entrepreneurs. Whether you're keynoting events, growing your business, or commanding the boardroom, you are highly skilled and accomplished at what you do. But something's missing. You don't have a cohesive brand to match your level of success. But not to worry, that's where we come in. We're Honeysuckle Lane Creative Co., and we create stunning visuals that capture the essence of your business and give you the online presence of your dreams. With a full suite of creative services, including photography, web design, graphic design, and marketing strategy, we make sure you're as extraordinary online as you are in your area of expertise. Ditch the DIY and work with an experienced team that gets results. Find us online at honeysucklelanecreative.com and on Instagram at honeysuckle_creative. Let's bring your brilliance to life with an unforgettable brand.
And we are back, and we're talking about shame. And y'all, I am so tired of being held back and controlled by shame. I'm here to talk about this so that I and we can learn to better manage shame and navigate through the shame, because shame is something that is very challenging to get rid of. I'm not going to say that we can't do it, but the likelihood of people just ridding themselves of shame is low in many cases. So we've got to learn how to manage our lives in the shame and navigate through it as best we can with what we have. So I was talking about some of the experiences that Black people have. And I always start off with me and my family and what we experience. But just generally speaking, Black people showcase so much shame in the way we treat ourselves and the way we treat our hair. And it's so evident. I was at an event I went to the fair. I took my kids to the fair. And we had a good time. Oh my gosh. It was everything. I always tell people one of the things that I love about the fair is the food. It's not even the rides for me. It's the funnel cakes. It's the alligator on a stick if you haven't had it. It's the turkey, the smoked turkey legs and the Polish sausage dogs. I mean, it's all good. The lemonade. You know it. You taste it. You smell it. I know you are. So, but I saw so many of us, and I love seeing us Black people in all shades and all sizes and all textures. I love seeing it. But one of the things that I don't love to see with us is the shame that we carry on our faces and in our postures, because we don't recognize our natural aesthetic as beautiful. There are few things more beautiful than Afro textured hair to me. And of course, I'm going to always think and say that because I'm Darius Peace, your natural hair expert. That's what I'll do. That's what I'll think. So I love that Afro textured and curly hair textures defy gravity, unlike any other texture of hair. It reaches towards the sun. It's voluminous and full. And what's cool about it is when your hair ascends in that way, it allows you to really mask any concerns that may be going on with your head. I've had so many people over the years to experience thinning and shedding and the shame that comes along with that. And I'll always encourage them, well, try wearing your natural hair texture, because what it'll do is it'll conceal any areas of concern that you have just by the very nature of it standing up and coiling together, so that you're less likely to see those areas that you're concerned about. And sometimes that's rejected, and other times it's like, yeah, that makes so much sense. Thank you so much, Mr. Peace, for being my natural hair expert. So, I just think that that's really cool. But, while I was there, I saw so many different hairstyles that revealed shame. So I'm going to talk about those different styles, and then following that, I'm going to go into some examples of shame so that we can know how to deal with this, because I don't want anybody to, think that I'm coming across as bashing my people, because that is not it. One thing about me is that I love my people, but I want us to get better in every way, shape, or form. And the only way that we're going to do that, or one of the only ways that we're going to do that, is by acknowledging the problems that we have, so that we can move forward and start focusing on creating solutions so that we can be better showcases of hair, better showcases of our lives. So I saw a lot of extreme baby hair. And for those of y'all who may not be aware of what that is, it's the showcase of the hair edges being plastered down onto the forehead with gel, and they swoop down onto the forehead with gel or holding sprays or edge controls, those type things. I saw a lot of that, and it was very inconsistent with the natural organic texture of one's hair. So if you saw someone with cornrowed braids, they would always accompany that cornrow with an extreme flat ironed, plastered with holding spray showcase of baby hair on the forehead. And I know that it is a common trend among young girls, young black girls right now. But that trend does come from a place of shame, wanting to appear to be biracial or non-black. Hair that just kind of lays down on the forehead. And that comes from a place of shame. I want to look like I got, quote unquote, good hair. I saw a lot of plastered lace fronts, very poorly done, without a lot of finesse, with the same plastering of these plastic edges that are laying on the head, on the forehead, hiding whatever your natural hair texture is, because this is the perceived image of beauty. Like, let me put on my non-black looking hair or my non-black looking wig to make myself feel beautiful, or make the world think I'm beautiful, or refer to me as beautiful, or see me as a standard of beauty. I saw people out there with head bonnets, which, I've always been taught that the purpose of a head bonnet was to go to bed so that you can preserve your hairstyle. But when I see that showcased in public, that shows me that I'm hiding something under this bonnet, which that's a showcase of shame. I don't want you to see my hair, so I'm going to hide it under this bonnet. Do-rags, to be able to preserve waves. Again, that's a sleeping tool to help preserve a hairstyle. So to wear that out in public, although I know that the intent is to lay the hair down so that you can create these beautiful crashing waves on the head, but even doing that, all that effort into doing that could still indicate that there's a shame of what my hair naturally does. I think about all the other races of people on the face of the earth who have straighter hair textures. It's just really wild to me that, in my experience, I never see any of them working that hard to make their hair do a certain thing. And I know that, that's because of the supremacy, the white supremacy, or the straight. And I'm not even gonna make it just all white at this point. And that's not me taking anything away from white supremacy, but I want to call this one right here straight hair supremacy, because it's the straight hair of all races that are non-black that really is presented as supreme. That's a supreme texture. So I'm going to keep it about hair in this regard. We'll save, topics of white supremacy for another podcast episode. But we're going to call it straight hair supremacy because across the board, anybody that has straight hair is typically viewing their hair as supreme. And we see it all over the place. We see it in the market with the way weaves are made and created and worn. You see so many straight hair weaves and wigs, but you see very few showcases of afro textured weaves, wigs, and extensions. And beyond that, you rarely see other races of people mimicking the beautiful, extraordinary textures of black people or people of afro descent. Curly hair. So that to me is a show that straight hair supremacy is what causes and influences black people's shame in the earth. And I am pointing the finger at that because it showcases the standard of beauty with straight hair. We've masked our hair for reasons of shame through uses of relaxers, stretching it to have a more, we call it easier maintenance, but I would call it a more biracial or multiracial look with the Jerry curl to stretch your curl. And it's interesting because we do these things and they're so damaging and compromising to our organic genetic showcase of who we are. But we don't consider that because it's shameful for us, and it's been shameful, and it's caused us to be rejected and abandoned and under-recognized and not acknowledged in so many different ways. And so I'm here to talk about that, to talk about why we as black people showcase so much shame with our hair and the 4 psychological breakdown or categories of shame, because in the field of psychology, they typically will break down shame in 4 categories. So you have your existential shame. It's so funny. I don't know. That word always gets me.
Existential.
Yes. Thank you, Eric. Existential. Yes. Say it again, Eric.
Existential.
Thank you. Why can't I do that?
Look at me putting my degree to work.
Yes. Existential shame. There's, and I'm going to go back and talk about what each of these are, and how they showcase themselves in the black community. Situational shame. There's class or caste shame. And then there's narcissistic shame. So I'm going to talk about class and caste for a minute because I saw a movie recently. It's called Origins by Innocent Ava DuVernay production. Such a good film because it brings to light the caste system that exists all over the world, just globally. And a lot of times we can confuse racism for what is really caste. And so if you get a chance, go check out that movie. They're not sponsoring us, but it was just so good that I wanted to put it out there. And if y'all are listening, the producers of Origin, please sponsor the My Hair and Happy podcast because we got you and we want you to have us too. But so let's talk about existential. I said it right. Existential shame. So existential shame occurs when we become self-aware of an objective and unpleasant truth about ourselves or a situation. So an example of that for us as black people would be being born black and being born with a certain hair texture and certain features. Like that shame of our existence occurs because of white supremacy and because of, as I said before, straight hair supremacy. We're frowned upon and we're rejected and viewed in at the lowest of the totem pole regarding beauty standards. And that's why it's so important that we, really shift the way we carry ourselves and do things, because we don't want, the only people who have control for real control of how we are viewed regarding beauty standards and where we exist on the totem pole, that's on us. So we have to switch that. So again, existential shame examples would be being born black and carrying the shame of just existing as a black person in the earth. Situational shame is the feeling we have when we're violating an ethical principle or interpersonal boundary or cultural norm. So an example of that could be a little black girl being rejected from performing in a ballet dance recital because her afro texture is assumed not to lay down in uniform with the other performers. I know I've had clients over the years who've talked about their little girls not being able to perform with certain ballet companies because of the concern of their afro texture hair not being able to lay down in uniform with the non-black girls. And I always thought that that was so absurd, and it is. And that's, that's just an example of situational shame, because in that situation that you're not able to participate and showcase your best self because yourself, your aesthetic self, is viewed as not enough or not beautiful or not in uniform. And the more you learn from me about Afro hair textures and how to better manage and navigate through these textures and make them do all the extraordinary things that we want them to do, you'll learn that there are no or very few limitations that we can experience with our Afro texture hair. So that's situational. Then there's class or caste shame. And this shame relates to social power, and it pertains to issues of skin color, social class, ethnic background, and gender. And it occurs in societies that really have rigid caste stratifications or disparate classes. And that's one of the things that we definitely experience here in the United States of America. I'll use an example of that happening intraculturally. And when I say intraculturally, I'm talking about those things that happen within the Afro culture, within Black people's experience here in the United States. And one example would be the paper bag brown test that people used to have to pass in order to get into certain high society organizations or sororities or fraternities. And sometimes it's still used, in different ways. But that paper bag test, or that good hair, bad hair, straight hair, loose hair, those different type tests would create a class or caste shame, and it would cast you into a certain position or social position within the culture. So that's an example of class or caste shaming. And then there's narcissistic shame, and this is perhaps one of the most toxic ones and one of the sneakiest ones. This one challenged me so deeply when I was doing my research on this. And it's pretty clear that I'm not just here presenting information. I'm getting online and I'm doing the necessary research to make sure that all of what I'm saying to you is valid and accurate. And if for any reason I find out that it's not, then we come back, revisit this, and correct it as we see fit. But narcissistic shame occurs when our self-image and our pride are wounded, affecting how we feel and think about ourselves as individuals, in contrast with the collective or a group. So an example of that would be, and again, this challenged me deeply. After I tell y'all an example, then I'm going to talk about me for a minute. So the example is defense mechanisms to mask or shame, mask the shame of our hair by wearing hairstyles or colors that are inconsistent with certain situations. So let's say we got somebody who works in healthcare. They work in the hospital setting, and they decide, you know what, I'm going to go to work with a big, bright orange and purple afro. And I've got it colored this way. It's an orange polka dot purple afro. And that right there is so inconsistent with healthcare. It's such an unnecessary distraction in many ways. But the narcissism in that is the effort to stand out or be seen or mask what it is that you may be ashamed of, which is your natural aesthetic. And so, again, all of those hairstyles and hair practices that I talked about earlier can easily be a showcase of that. But when I thought about the narcissistic side of things and was reading on the definition of narcissism and what narcissistic shame looks like, I could not help but really look at me and like, wow, am I narcissistic? Am I carrying a narcissistic shame about myself? And I mean, that really challenged me. I had to stop my research on the general topic so I can do some self-research and see about me. Like, am I carrying narcissistic shame? So I started to think about, different aspects of my personality, and I try to always showcase myself as someone who has it together. I try to showcase myself as someone who is articulate and smart. I try to showcase myself as someone who experiences success in life. And when I started looking up the definition of what a narcissist is, it named those things. It started talking about people who were showcasing their best selves so that you wouldn't be able to see their worst selves, or showcasing themselves as articulate or wearing flashier things to mask that they may not be those things. And so I looked at it and I was like, I can see how there are areas in my life and in my personality and in my presentation that could be perceived as narcissistic. And then I started thinking, well, is this showcase of narcissistic shame bad, and how is it bad? Because who wants to present their worst selves to anybody? I didn't grow up well off. I grew up in a what the United States would categorize as a poor upbringing, and so that was shameful for me growing up, and that's something that was also shameful for me as an adult. And so I carry myself in a certain way because I don't want to present poverty. I don't want to go back to poverty. I try to make sure that I speak with a standard vernacular of English so that I'm not perceived as someone who comes from a poor background that speaks with poor vernacular or uneducated vernacular. And I can, the root of that for me, or the origin of that for me, goes back to the shame of coming from parents who didn't have 4-year college degrees, who started having children young, and just not having that as my background, being the first generation within my family to go to college and graduate with a degree. And that doesn't mean, or I don't think that I'm better than them as a result of that. But I can be, because I'm not. But I can be honest with myself and with you that that's something that was shameful for me. People see me today and they look at me and think that I must come from this background of highly educated black folks. And that's not my true story. And I don't go out here lying and making it seem like that's my true story, but my presentation would indicate that. So and so I can acknowledge that there's a showcase of narcissistic shame in my life. And I'm saying that I'm saying that because in order for me to get better, I have to acknowledge it to myself, and I have no shame with acknowledging it to you. I'm not saying that you carry this or you don't carry it, but this is mine. And because my aim is to float, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, I am less likely to be able to float if I am not letting go of the things that are weighing me down and holding me back. And so I'm acknowledging it, I'm addressing it so that I can move forward with this, because I can't handle it anymore. It's like I'm losing the strength to be able to carry that kind of stuff. So that just made me think about some of those things about me. But let's go to another commercial break before we get to, because we're talking about the problem right now, but I always like to close things out with a solution on how we can better manage and navigate through shame. So let's hear another word from a sponsor, y'all.
Hi, I'm Danielle Hines, the owner and founder of Creed 63. Creed 63 is located in the Arthur Shores Law Center in the Birmingham Civil Rights District. Creed 63 does 4 things for small businesses and entrepreneurs. We have a podcast studio, co-working space, virtual offices, and private offices. Stop by anytime you are in the Civil Rights District to see how Creed 63 can help you grow and expand your small business. You can find us at creed63.com.
And we are back, and we're talking about shame. And we're talking about letting the shame go because it's too much to carry. I know that I am not the only one who is weighed down and just over carrying the shame. And what's crazy is that some of us are walking around here with this shame and we don't even know we carrying it. We weighed down, we walking slow, we getting sick, not getting well. We just don't even know what to do because we've carried it for so long. We've inherited this demon, and it's just time to release it and let it go. So, solution. I always tell people I'm not one of those people who runs away from a problem. I believe that we should address problems, but we should focus on the solution. And if you're listening to this, repeat it after me. Moving forward, I'm going to address my problems and I'm going to focus on my solutions, not the opposite where I address the solution like, well, I know I got to do better, but no, and focus on the problem and keep perpetuating that. No, we're addressing the problem and we're focusing on the solution. And here are a few steps that all of us can implement to move forward and let go of this shame so that we can float. Because I know I'm not the only one out here who is wanting to float. I have to float. I got to be free of all of this. So step number 1, recognizing the shame as it arises in your life, in our lives. So I notice the shame. I know when the shame is coming up. And in order for us to do that, we have to acknowledge the shame. So recognizing it and opening our eyes and our minds and our hearts so that we can see, okay, this is this shame coming up now. This is the shame, so I got to do something about this. Step 2, understanding the origins of the shame. Where did this come from? In reference to Afro texture hair, it's all over the place. The media has taught us that our hair has never been enough. All of the showcases of marketing platforms always showcase straight hair as the standard of beauty for Black people. I remember when I was a little boy and I would see commercials on TV just for me. It was a cute, catchy song, just for me, just this whole catchy song. And, that became the standard of beauty for little girls, little Black girls, and, men rocking S curls and all of those things. That became the standard. It was all over the marketing campaigns. That was what people in Hollywood would wear. They looked that way. And understanding the origins of how, as we say, straight hair supremacy has influenced the world to reject natural occurring Afro textures. So knowing the origins. Number 3, check in with yourself and build some self-compassion and self-acceptance. So what that means is, don't beat yourself up for experiencing shame. We don't have to do that because that only perpetuates more shame. But what we can do is start accepting ourselves, accepting all the things about myself. This is my afro. This is my hair texture. This is my hair situation. Even people who may be experiencing thinning or shedding or anything like that, hair may not be as thick as it used to be. It's mine. This is my thinning. My showcase of beauty may not be what it used to be, but it's mine. And so I am responsible for redefining what this beauty is for my life today. So accepting our beauty as extraordinary and as unique. Number 4, and this is, for some people, like, try writing yourself a compassionate letter. There are some people who like to write. There are some people who like to journal. Instead of journaling and writing, I decided to launch a podcast for freedom. So, if you need to do a podcast, holla at Creed 63, and get your podcast going. And number 4, acknowledging the different parts of yourself that are present. So that means that instead of focusing on the things that you may be ashamed of or don't like about yourself, let's focus on the things that you do like about yourself and really learn to like the things that you don't like about yourself or change them. So there's that. Owning your extraordinary beauty and calling it that, extraordinary beauty. It may be different from everybody else's beauty, and that's what makes it extraordinary. So let's own that. And then the last one, sharing in the context of safe relationships. So don't just go airing out your stuff to people who may not be trustworthy. Talk about your stuff to people who have your best interest at heart and who have the capacity to have your best interest at heart. I always tell people I don't deal with people who don't think I'm the bomb. If you don't think I'm the bomb and I'm around you and I think you the bomb, that means that this is an incompatible relationship and I'm less likely to be able to be safe around you. So maybe you can add that as a standard. But in closing, I don't want none of y'all out here interpreting this, what I'm saying, as me bashing black people, because that's never my intent to bash black people just because I'm airing out a little bit of our dirty laundry. That's not what I do. My intent is to always love myself. My intent is to always love my people. My intent is to always love my hair. My intent is to always love my genetics. My intent is to always love my DNA. Why? Because my hair ain't nappy and your hair ain't nappy either. Until next time. Thank you for listening to the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast. Reach out to us on social media. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok, and we're on Facebook. All the platforms at the My Hair Ain't Nappy podcast. We want to hear your own stories. Until next time, love you and love your hair.